My son told me to pack my bags and find somewhere else to die. So I packed my bags and found somewhere else for him to live instead. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone pushes a sweet old lady too far? Hit that subscribe button and find out what I discovered about the power of patience and paperwork. You might be surprised by what this grandmother had up her sleeve. You know, people look at me now, a 72-year-old woman with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around my neck, and they think they know my story. They see someone who bakes cookies for church socials, someone who needs help reaching things on high shelves, someone who should just be grateful for whatever scraps of attention her family throws her way. They have no idea what I am capable of when pushed beyond my breaking point. My name is Dorothy Mae Henderson, though most folks around our small Georgia town call me Miss. I have lived in Millfield for 47 years, raised 3 children in the same white colonial house on Maple Street, and buried my husband Harold in the cemetery behind First Baptist Church. For the past decade, I would been living with my youngest son, Kevin, and his wife, Brandy, in what used to be Harold's and my dream home. Notice I said, used to be. The morning everything changed, started like any other Tuesday in March. The dogwood trees were just beginning to bloom, painting our neighborhood in soft pink and white petals that reminded me of the Easter dresses I used to sew for my daughter when she was small. I was in the kitchen at 6:30 like always, making coffee and planning to prepare breakfast for Kevin before he left for his job at the insurance office downtown. The morning routine had become sacred to me, one of the few times I felt useful in what had become their house instead of mine. Brandy stumbled into the kitchen wearing those ridiculous fuzzy slippers that looked like cartoon animals and a bathrobe that had seen better days. Her blonde hair was piled on top of her head in a messy bun, and she had that look in her eyes that meant trouble was brewing. I would learn to recognize that expression. Over the years, it was the same look she got right before she decided to rearrange my furniture or throw away my belongings without asking. "Dorothy, we need to talk," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries like "good morning" or "thank you for making coffee" before I was even awake. She plopped down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table that Harold and I had bought for our first apartment in 1973, and fixed me with that stare that made me feel like I was on trial. "Of course, dear. What is on your mind?" I kept my voice pleasant and accommodating, the way I would learn to do over the years. Harmony at all costs, that had become my motto since moving in with them. Don't rock the boat, don't cause problems, just be grateful they took you in. "Kevin and I have been talking, and we think it is time for you to start looking into some other living arrangements." She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather or discussing what to have for dinner. "We are planning to start a family soon, and we are going to need the space. Plus, you would probably be happier somewhere with people your own age." You know, the words hit me like a physical blow. I set down my coffee mug carefully, my hands trembling just slightly. "Other living arrangements? Brandy, honey, this is my home. Harold and I bought this house. We raised our children here. We made every mortgage payment for 28 years. She waved her hand dismissively, like my words were gnats buzzing around her head. "Well, sure. But that was a long time ago. Kevin's been taking care of you for 10 years now. We pay the utilities, we pay the property taxes, we maintain everything. It is really our house now, isn't it? And besides, you are getting older. What if you fall down the stairs? What if you have a medical emergency, and we are not here? Wouldn't you feel safer in one of those nice assisted living places?" I felt my chest tighten with a familiar mixture of hurt and frustration. This conversation wasn't new. It had been building for months in small comments and casual suggestions. Brandy had been testing the waters, seeing how I would react to hints about senior communities and retirement homes. But hearing it stated so bluntly, in my own kitchen on a peaceful Tuesday morning, felt like being slapped. "I don't need assisted living, Brandy. I take care of myself just fine. I do all the cooking and cleaning here. I maintain the garden. I take care of Harold's roses. I am not some invalid who needs constant supervision." Kevin chose that moment to walk into the kitchen, straightening his tie and reaching for the travel mug I would filled with coffee for him. My baby boy, now 45 years old with thinning brown hair and the soft middle that comes from too many years behind a desk. He kissed Brandy on the cheek and barely glanced in my direction. "Morning, Mom. Brandy told you about our plans, right? We found this great place about 20 minutes away. Sunset Manor. They have activities and meals included, plus medical staff on site. You would love it there, Kevin, sweetheart. I don't want to move to Sunset Manor. I want to stay in my home, with my family." I tried to keep the pleading out of my voice, but I could hear it creeping in anyway. This was my son, the child I would rock to sleep during thunderstorms and cheered for at Little League games. Surely he would understand. "Mom, be reasonable. You are 72 years old. What happens when you are 80 and cannot manage the stairs anymore? What happens when you need help with medications or medical appointments? Brandy and I work full-time. We cannot be your caregivers. And like Brandy said, we want to start our own family. We need privacy and space." The way he said it made me feel like an intrusion, a burden they would been carrying out of obligation rather than love. I looked around my kitchen, at the yellow wallpaper Harold and I had hung together in 1985, at the window over the sink where I would watched my children play in the backyard, at the marks on the doorframe where we would measure their heights every birthday. This wasn't just a house to me. This was the repository of 47 years of memories, the place where Harold had taken his last breath holding my hand, the foundation of everything I considered home. "When were you thinking this would happen?" I asked quietly, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. "Well, we have already put down a deposit at Sunset Manor," Brandy said, not meeting my eyes. "They have an opening next month. We figured that would give you time to sort through your things and decide what you want to take with you." Next month? They would already made the decision, already put down money, already planned my entire future without bothering to ask what I wanted. I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced since Harold's funeral when his sister had tried to tell me how to grieve properly. "I see, and if I don't want to go to Sunset Manor?" Kevin looked uncomfortable for the first time since the conversation started. "Mom, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. You don't really have a choice here. Brandy and I are adults. This is our house now, and we are asking you nicely to make other arrangements. Don't force us to make this ugly." There it was, the threat underneath all the reasonable-sounding arguments. Move out voluntarily or be forced out. Accept their plan or face the consequences. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to find traces of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during storms and tell me he loved me more than ice cream. That child had grown into a man who could look his mother in the eye and essentially evict her from her own home. "I understand," I said finally, because what else was there to say? Fighting with them in that moment wouldn't accomplish anything except making the next month even more miserable than it was already going to be. "Great. I am so glad you are being reasonable about this." Dorothy Brandy's voice was bright and cheerful, as if we would just agreed on what movie to watch rather than discuss dismantling my entire life. "I will call Sunset Manor today and confirm your move. In date, this is going to be so much better for everyone involved." Kevin grabbed his coffee and briefcase, kissed Brandy goodbye, and headed for the door. He paused next to my chair and patted my shoulder, the kind of patronizing gesture you might give to a child who would just agree to take medicine. "You are doing the right thing, Mom. You will see." And then he was gone, leaving me alone with Brandy and the wreckage of my morning routine. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after Brandy disappeared, upstairs to get ready for her part-time job at the beauty salon, staring out the window at Harold's rose garden and trying to process what had just happened. You see, there were things about my situation that Kevin and Brandy had either forgotten or chosen to ignore. Details that might have changed their approach if they would bothered to pay attention. But people have a tendency to see what they want to see, especially when it comes to elderly family members. They see frailty and dependence and assume that is the whole story. What they didn't see was that I would been managing the household finances for the past 5 years, ever since Kevin had gotten overwhelmed trying to balance work and what he called mom's expenses. They didn't know that I would been quietly paying the property taxes and homeowner's insurance from my own savings account, letting them think their monthly contributions were covering more than they actually were. They didn't know that the reason the house was in such good condition was because I would been using Harold's life insurance money to pay for maintenance and repairs. Most importantly, they didn't know about the conversation I would had with our family lawyer 6 months earlier, when I would started to sense that this day was coming. James Morrison had been Harold's business partner for over 30 years, and he would helped us with the estate planning after Harold's diagnosis. He was also one of the few people who knew the complete truth about the ownership status of the house on Maple Street. "Dorothy," he would said during that visit back in September, "I want to make sure you understand your legal position here. When Harold passed, you inherited everything outright. The house is in your name. The savings accounts are in your name. The investment portfolio is in your name. Kevin has no legal claim to any of it unless you choose to give it to him. But I have been living with them for 10 years, James. They have been taking care of me, helping with expenses. Have they, though? I have seen your bank statements, remember? You have been paying your own way and then some. If anything, they have been living off your generosity without acknowledging it. That is not the same thing as supporting you." I would left his office that day with a folder full of documents and a much clearer understanding of my options. But I would hoped it wouldn't come to this. I would hoped that Kevin would remember who raised him, who sacrificed for him, who loved him unconditionally for 45 years. I would hoped that family would mean more than real estate and convenience. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of awkward conversations and tense silences. Brandy had thrown herself into the project of relocating me with the enthusiasm of someone redecorating a guest room. She brought home brochures from Sunset Manor, talked endlessly about the activities they offered, and the friends I would make, and started making lists of what I should pack and what I should let go of. "You really don't need all this furniture, Dorothy," she said one afternoon. Standing in my bedroom and gesturing at the antique dresser Harold had refinished as an anniversary gift. "The rooms at Sunset Manor are much smaller. You will want to keep things simple and functional." Simple and functional. That is what they wanted to reduce my life to. A few simple and functional possessions that would fit neatly into a senior living facility room. Never mind that every piece of furniture told a story, held a memory, represented years of saving and planning and building a life together. Kevin had gotten more distant as the move in date approached, as if he could avoid feeling guilty by avoiding conversations entirely. He would come home from work, eat the dinner I would prepared, and disappear into their bedroom or the den to watch television. When I tried to talk to him about the practical aspects of the move, what would happen to my car, how often I could visit, whether I could bring Harold's ashes, he would mutter something about working out the details later and change the subject. But it was the conversation I overheard between Kevin and Brandy that finally crystallized my resolve. I was coming downstairs from organizing my closet when I heard them talking in the living room. Their voices low but not quite low enough. "I still think you should talk to a lawyer about making this official," Brandy was saying. "What if she changes her mind and decides to come back? What if she tries to claim ownership of the house again?" "She will not," Kevin replied, sounding more confident than he had any right to be. "Once she is settled at Sunset Manor, she will realize how much easier her life is. And honestly, if she did try to make trouble, who is going to believe a confused old woman over us? We have 10 years of living here, we have documentation of paying expenses. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? I just want to make sure we are protected. This house is worth almost $400,000 now, Kevin. That is our retirement fund. Our kids' college money. I don't want some senior moment on her part to mess up our financial future. Confused old woman senior moment. Our financial future." I stood on those stairs listening to my son and his wife discuss my property, like I was already dead, like my decade of supporting them financially meant nothing, Like the 47 years Harold and I had invested in this house were just an inconvenience in their grand plan. That night, I called James Morrison at home. "James, it is Dorothy Henderson. I need to schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning, and I need you to bring the paperwork we discussed back in September." "Dorothy, is everything all right? You sound upset." "Everything is about to be exactly right, James. Can you meet me at 9 o'clock at your office?" "Of course. What should I prepare?" "I want to sell the house." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sell the house? Dorothy, are you sure?" "That is a big decision. Maybe we should talk about this more carefully." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I want to sell it as quickly as possible, and I want to make sure Kevin and Brandy understand that they need to find somewhere else to live." The meeting with James the next morning was one of the most empowering conversations I would had in years. We discussed listing prices, timeline for sale, and the legal requirements for giving Kevin and Brandy notice to vacate. Most importantly, we talked about what I wanted to do with the proceeds from the sale. "There is something I want you to understand, James. This isn't just about revenge, though I will not pretend that is not part of it. This is about reclaiming my life. I have spent 10 years being grateful for scraps of attention in my own home. 10 years being treated like a burden instead of the woman who built this family. I am done being grateful for the privilege of being tolerated." "What are you thinking for your next step?" "I have been looking at some luxury senior communities in Savannah. Not assisted living. Independent living with optional services. Places where I can have my own apartment, my own kitchen, my own life. But with people around if I want company. Places where I will be seen as a resident who chose to be there, not a dependent who had to be managed." "That sounds wonderful, Dorothy. And the financial aspect? After I buy a nice 2-bedroom condo in one of those communities, I will still have about $200,000 left over. I am thinking about traveling, Harold, and I always planned to take a European river cruise, but never quite got around to it. I am also thinking about setting up college funds for my grandchildren, the ones who still call me grandma instead of treating me like hired help. And Kevin and Brandy are about to learn that actions have consequences. They wanted me out of their house so badly. Well, now they can get out of mine." The house went on the market on a Thursday morning. I would arranged for Kevin and Brandy to be out. He was at work and she was at the salon when the real estate agent came to put up the sign and take photos. I wanted to be alone when I walked through each room one last time as the owner, remembering all the moments that had made this place home. In the kitchen, I could see Harold teaching our daughter Sarah how to scramble eggs while I got ready for church. In the living room, I could see Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere and children's laughter echoing off the walls. In our bedroom, I could see Harold and me planning our retirement, dreaming about grandchildren who would visit and play in the backyard under the old oak tree. But I could also see the last 10 years clearly now. The gradual erosion of my status from family matriarch to tolerated guest, the casual dismissal of my opinions, the assumption that my needs were less important than their convenience, the way they would stopped asking what I wanted and started telling me what was best for me. Kevin called me at 3:15 that afternoon, his voice tight with panic. "Mom, what the hell is going on? There is a for sale sign in our front yard and strangers walking through our house taking pictures. It is not your house, Kevin. It is my house, and I have decided to sell it." "You cannot sell our house. We live here. We have been here for 10 years, and now you have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Your father and I raised you to be self-sufficient, and I have complete faith that you and Brandy can figure out your own housing situation." "Mom, you are being ridiculous. You cannot just sell the house out from under us without warning. Where are we supposed to go? We cannot afford another mortgage right now. I am sure you will think of something. You are both smart, capable adults at least. That is what you told me when you decided I needed to move to Sunset Manor. I am sure those same qualities that make you capable of managing my life will serve you well in managing your own. This is insane. You are having some kind of breakdown. I am calling Dr. Richardson and having you evaluated." You cannot make major financial decisions in your mental state. My mental state is just fine, Kevin. In fact, I feel clearer than I have in years. And Dr. Richardson already knows about my plans. I had lunch with him last week to discuss my decision. He thinks it is wonderful that I am taking charge of my life instead of letting other people make choices for me. There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear Kevin trying to figure out his next move. When he spoke again, his voice had changed from panic to anger. Fine. If that is how you want to play this, Mom, that is fine. But don't expect us to help you move your stuff to whatever overpriced old folks' home you end up in. Don't expect us to visit or bring the grandkids around. You are choosing money over family, and you will have to live with that choice. Kevin, sweetheart, I am not choosing money over family. I am choosing self-respect over being treated like an unwanted burden. There is a difference. We never treated you like a burden. You told me I needed to find somewhere else to die, Kevin. You planned my entire future, without asking what I wanted. You put down a deposit on a facility I never agreed to live in. You stood in my kitchen and told me I didn't have a choice about leaving my own home. If that is not treating someone like a burden, I don't know what is. I hung up before he could respond, and I turned off my phone before he could call back. There would be time for more conversations later, after he would had a chance to absorb the reality of the situation. For now, I wanted to enjoy the silence and the sense of power that came from finally taking control. The house sold in 6 days. 6 days, the real estate market in our area had been hot for months, and a well-maintained colonial on a tree-lined street was exactly what young families were looking for. We had multiple offers over asking price, and I was able to choose buyers who reminded me of Harold and me 47 years ago, a young couple with their first baby, full of dreams and plans for the future. Kevin and Brandy spent those 6 days in a state of escalating panic and rage. They consulted lawyers who told them what I already knew, that the house was legally mine to sell and that they had no claim to it. They looked at rental properties and discovered that the housing market that had worked in my favor as a seller was working against them as prospective tenants. They called my other children looking for support and found instead that Sarah and Michael were proud of me for finally standing up for myself. Good for you, Mom, Sarah had said when I called to tell her what was happening. I have been watching Kevin and Brandy take advantage of your kindness for years, but I didn't know how to say anything without causing family drama. Maybe this will teach them some appreciation for everything you have done, Michael. My oldest had been even more blunt. About time, Mom. Kevin's been acting like he inherited the house when Dad died, and Brandy's been treating you like Liv. In help, they need a reality check. The closing was scheduled for a Friday morning in April. I would already moved most of my belongings to my new apartment in Savannah, a beautiful 2-bedroom unit in a luxury senior community called Harbor View, where I had a balcony overlooking the river and access to a fitness center, library, and social activities that actually interested me. The residents there treated me like a new neighbor to welcome, not a dependent to manage. Kevin and Brandy had found a rental house across town, but they would had to scramble to come up with the deposit and first month's rent. Brandy had been forced to take on additional hours at the salon, and Kevin had mentioned something about borrowing money from his brother. The house they would found was smaller and older than what they would been living in, and the rent was more than they would been contributing to household expenses at my place. On the morning of the closing, I drove past the house on Maple Street one last time. The new owners had already started moving in, and I could see children's toys scattered on the front porch and boxes stacked in the driveway. It made me smile to think of that house being filled with young voices and new memories again. I met Kevin and Brandy at the lawyer's office for the final paperwork. They looked tired and stressed, and Brandy had been crying. I could tell from the red around her eyes and the careful way she would apply her makeup to try to hide it. "Mom, it is not too late to change your mind," Kevin said as we sat in the waiting room before being called in. "We can call off the sale, work something out. Maybe we were too hasty about the Sunset Manor thing. Maybe we can all just live together and make it work. Kevin, the papers are already signed. The new owners are moving in this afternoon. Besides, I don't want to work it out." I like my new place. I like having my own space and my own life. I like being around people who see me as an individual instead of a responsibility. But we are family. Family takes care of each other. You are absolutely right. Sweetheart, family does take care of each other. That is exactly what I have been doing for the past 10 years. Taking care of my family by paying the property taxes and insurance, maintaining the house, cooking and cleaning, and providing a stable home. And that is what I am doing now. Taking care of myself for the first time in a decade. The closing took less than an hour. I signed papers transferring ownership to the young family with the baby, received a check for significantly more money than Harold, and I had ever imagined that house would be worth, and shook hands with my real estate agent, who congratulated me on a successful sale. Kevin and Brandy left without saying goodbye. I drove back to Savannah, feeling lighter than I had in years. My new apartment was waiting for me. My neighbors had invited me to join them for dinner at the community restaurant, and I had a river cruise booked for the fall. Most importantly, I had my self-respect back. 3 months later, Kevin called me on a Sunday afternoon. His voice was different, quieter, more thoughtful than it had been during those angry weeks in March and April. "Mom, it is Kevin. How are you doing?" "I am doing very well, sweetheart. How are you and Brandy settling into your new place?" "We are adjusting. It has been harder than we thought it would be, financially and otherwise. We had to get a second car because the rental house is farther from our jobs. Brandy's working more hours. I have been picking up freelance work on weekends. We are making it work, but it is tight. I am sorry to hear you are having a difficult time, Mom." I called because I wanted to apologize. Not because we want anything from you, but because I have been thinking a lot about how we handled the whole situation. We were selfish and disrespectful, and we treated you like you were a burden instead of our mother who had sacrificed for us our whole lives. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. The first tears I would shed since this whole ordeal began. "Thank you for saying that, Kevin. It means more than you know." Brandy wants to apologize too, but she is embarrassed about how she acted. She keeps saying she cannot believe she talked to you the way she did, especially in your own house. Everyone makes mistakes, Kevin. The important thing is learning from them. We were wondering, would you maybe like to have dinner sometime? Not because we want to ask you for anything, but because we miss you. The kids miss their grandma, and we miss our mom. I smiled, looking out at the river from my balcony where I would been reading when he called. I would like that very much, but you will have to come to Savannah. I am not quite ready to drive back to Millfield yet. Of course, we will come to you and Mom. We would love to see your new place, if you would like to show it to us. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time watching the boats go by and thinking about forgiveness and boundaries, and the difference between being family and being taken for granted. I thought about Harold, and what he would have said about the whole situation. I could almost hear his voice telling me he was proud of me, for standing up for myself, proud of me for not settling for being tolerated instead of loved. The truth is, I didn't sell that house for revenge, though I will not pretend the justice of it all didn't feel satisfying. I sold it because I finally realized that being grateful for scraps of attention wasn't the same as being loved, and that enabling someone's disrespectful behavior wasn't the same as keeping the peace. I sold it because at 72 years old, I decided I deserved better than being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. Most importantly, I sold it because I wanted my family to understand that relationships are built on mutual respect, not assumptions about who owes what to whom. Kevin and Brandy had started taking me for granted because I would never given them a reason not to. I would been so focused on being the accommodating mother and mother-in-law that I would forgotten to be a person with my own needs and boundaries. The funny thing is, my relationship with Kevin is better now than it has been in years. Not because I punished him, but because I forced all of us to reset our expectations and interactions. He talks to me now like I am his mother, who chose to love him, not like I am an obligation he inherited. Brandy treats me with respect because she learned that disrespect has consequences. And me, I learned that it is never too late to advocate for yourself, even when people assume you are too old or too dependent to have any power. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their worst impulses. I learned that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it is necessary. So to anyone out there who is being taken for granted by family members who think you should just be grateful for whatever attention they throw your way, remember this: respect isn't something you have to earn from your own children. It is something they should offer freely, and something you have every right to demand. What do you think? Was I right to sell the house? Or should I have just accepted their decision and moved to the assisted living facility? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about life lessons learned the hard way. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim anymore.